Hello, how's it going? So, hi, I'm Eugene Myers. Normally, I just do live streams of NES games with my NES Alphanumeric series, but this is going to be my first kind of unboxing video review. I don't usually do these, but so I'm kind of a controller junkie. I really like collecting NES controllers. I have a bunch of different ones, and many of them I don't use, like the NES Max, which I modified with a thumbstick. I have like the NES Advantage, and the one that I mostly use right now is the Hudson Soft Joy Card Sansui SSS, which is kind of like the premium NES controller. But lately, people have been talking about the Hyperkin Cadet controller, which Hyperkin originally released with their NES Classic, and most recently has released with the RetroN HD console. And I've been hearing really kind of bad things about the console itself, which is like a clone console, Nintendo on a chip. But I've been hearing great things about the controller, and so I've been really curious about it. And I've been kind of waiting, thinking about whether I wanted to go ahead and pick one up. And I finally decided to get one because the price was pretty good, and the curiosity got to me, and I kind of figured I'd do a review and see how that goes. So I ordered this from Castlemania. You've probably seen other YouTube stars for like retro gaming getting like boxes from Castlemania, so I kind of feel like I'm one of them, but I actually ordered this and paid for it. And the shipping was really fast. The customer service was terrific. The packaging is really strong, which is why I had some scissors. And the price was great. And plus I got a discount code. I'm a Patreon for a couple of folks on YouTube, including John Riggs, and so I used the John Riggs Patreon only code, which is really cool. So that saved me about 20%. So here it is. It's really, well, the box is a little mashed. I'm gonna have to blame the United States Postal Service for that one, but here it is, the NES Cadet controller. This is the NES style one that comes with the black and gray RetroN HD, which is actually, if I was going to get one, that's the one I would want because it does look kind of like the NES style. Without getting the console, I kind of want the black one, but they're not selling that individually yet. So I have no idea if I like this, if I want to keep it. If anyone wants to trade their black one for a NES Classic one, let me know in the comments. So I'm just going to open this thing up, and we're going to test it out. So one of the things that, maybe I should have done a better job of trying to preserve the box. One of the things that kind of bothers me when I see reviews of controllers is people just kind of like open it up and they like press the buttons and they're like, oh yeah, it feels pretty good, it feels authentic, and then you don't really know, I think, whether the controller is going to be any good unless you start playing a game with it and you kind of see how responsive it is. And people don't tend to do that part of the review. Like one of my favorite controllers is actually the 8BitDo NES30, and it's a terrific controller, but the D-pad is not really as good as an original NES controller. So and I didn't notice that for a little while until I was playing Kid Icarus, and I realized that I was accidentally triggering diagonals, which is kind of a problem when you're playing the game, because if you move right and then press the down button, then Pit actually will drop through the floor and you'll probably die. So I started noticing that, and the way that I fixed that, and maybe I'll do a video on that at some point, the way that I fixed that is I swapped out the D-pad from an original NES controller into the 8BitDo, and now it is pretty much perfect. Like I really like it. So here's the packaging. There's like a bunch of different unboxings of these controllers online, so I'm not going to belabor that too much. So one of the selling points of this, some of the selling points of the controller, it has a 10-foot cord, which is pretty nice. I usually like to play with wired controllers if I can, but even a regular NES controller is like pretty short. It's like six feet, I think. So if you're playing on an HD TV in your living room and you're sitting far away from the TV, then I have a bunch of different extension cords. The best one that I have is from Retro USB, but I have another one, and they're like fine. But this is pretty nice. the plug part of it doesn't feel quite as good as an NES controller. And then here, the other selling point is it's got these kind of corners, the Hyperkin corner, and then it's got these ridges on the back, or these bubbles on the back, that are supposed to make it a little bit more comfortable. And yeah, it actually does fit the hand pretty nicely. Feels a little bit lightweight. The buttons, honestly, people say that the buttons feel really good. They feel okay. They feel, the controller itself feels a little bit hollow, I have to say. But it's not bad. It's not bad. So yeah, I can kind of see why people say that this feels pretty good. It does feel pretty decent, actually. So we'll have to see. The main thing that I want to do is I'm actually going to try it out with a game and see. So actually, I don't know if you can tell on this. I see there's like a little divot like in the controller decal on the cover, the vinyl covering, and like right there. And that's just how it was like out of the packaging. So right now it already looks like there's like a bite taken out of it, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, it does feel pretty comfortable. So the other thing that I'd like to do is I want to do a little teardown of the controller and see what's actually inside this thing. But I guess I will do a gameplay test first, and then we'll come back. Okay, so here I am. I'm back. Going to test the controller out on a game, and the best game for me to test it out on is Super Mario Bros. 3, which I actually know really well, and I know how the controls are supposed to feel. And there are a couple things that I can test whether it's like really responsive or not. The D-pad primarily. So like I was saying, the controller that I use most often right now is the Hudson Soft Joy-Card Sansui SSS, which is kind of the gray and gold standard. It's basically, this is a Japanese-made controller, third party, but it was made, it feels like, to the same standards as an NES controller. In some ways, I feel like the buttons feel a little bit better than even a regular NES controller. It's a little bit larger, and it's also got like rounded edges, so this is a little bit more comfortable than your rectangular NES controller. And then of course we've got Hyperkin, which has their own solution to that. They've taken out the edges. They've added these little rounded things on the back here. So I'm going to swap out the controller, and we'll see how it fits into the port here. The cord feels like a little bit thinner than the Joy-Card's cord, but and this piece here feels a little flimsier. But we're gonna test it out and see how this works. A little bit of a tight fit there, but it's a brand new controller, so who knows. And I'm not going to use game audio on here. I don't intend to monetize this review, but I also don't necessarily want Nintendo to grab any rights to it. So here we go. And here's the Hyperkin. The start button works. Oh. There we go. All right. Actually, it's a little bit annoying to not have any sound. Okay. So, seems pretty responsive so far. Buttons really feel, it feels much more hollow, and they're sort of clickier. They sort of feel a little bit soft, but I can hear like an audible click. But it's not too bad. Let's see. Yep. Pretty much what I was expecting. The D-pad really does feel pretty comfortable. Okay. So what I'm really curious about is the test that I usually have for a good D-pad is whether Mario can slide under a block easily or not. When my 8-bit controller wasn't that responsive, I couldn't do it. I think I tried like 7 out of 10 times I failed. And it's a really simple maneuver. It should be really easy with a controller. So here, I'm going to give it a shot and see. All right, that looks pretty good. He's able to slide under the block. All right, that's kind of my test for the controller. D-pad really does feel pretty good. I don't see any problems. Like I said, it feels a little bit lighter than the other controller. I mean, I've been playing on the Joy Card, and that has a little bit extra hardware in there. It actually has like turbo functions, and it actually also allows you to plug a headphone into the controller itself and circumvent the audio from the NES, from the TV output, and so you can listen to it like while you're playing. But yeah, in general, what people have been saying about this controller, I kind of agree. I think. Whoops, and that's just my crappy playing right there. It just feels a little bit different from playing, with a regular controller. But I also really have no complaints. It feels pretty comfortable. It does fit the palm pretty well. What's going on here? No Goombas? Another Goomba went away. I guess I killed it. So yeah, I kind of have to say it's pretty favorable. I was skeptical, but you know what? For I think I paid about $11 for this thing with shipping and the 20% off code. Retail is $12.99. If you're looking for a good NES controller, I think probably this is a good alternative. I don't know how it'll hold up to, play over time, but my first impressions are this is probably the best clone controller I've played with in a while. So there you have it. Time to do the teardown, see what's inside. Okay, so we're back. I now am going to open this thing up and see what's inside the controller. Like I said, it feels pretty light. I think what I'm thinking is going to be inside here is it's going to be just like a PCB, like a plain PCB. I mean, these controllers are fairly simple, so there's not really going to be much to it. But I'm expecting there's probably going to be like a glop top kind of thing, which you usually find in most of the knockoff controllers. But I'm interested to see what the D-pad and the button piece and the buttons look like, and what the rubber membranes look like inside here. So let's just check that out and see. All right. So, off to a great start here. Just a bunch of regular Phillips head screws in here, like you'd expect to find in an NES controller. I think there might be, I'm not sure if there's an extra screw or not. I'm not sure how this tracks the original NES controller. I could take one of them apart, I suppose, and see. But, all right, here we go. Hopefully I don't lose any of these pieces. Okay. Kind of doesn't want to come apart, which is interesting. Maybe that's why nobody's done a teardown of this thing yet. Is there another screw? Ah, interesting. There's another screw underneath the sticker here. So I am going to have to destroy my Hyperkin sticker. I don't think this will come off. Alright, well, in the name of science, I suppose. Yeah, it's just going to come right off. Alright. For science, this is probably why nobody's done a teardown. So this actually has an extra screw in here. Now nobody's going to want to trade with me. But, alright. So far, it pretty much looks like an NES PCB. I Obviously a very different shape. Okay. Hey, so that's interesting here. So let me turn this around a little bit. So it doesn't have a glob top. It actually has a circuit in there. It says Hyperkin NES controller. This actually looks pretty nice. This is definitely a little bit above the standards that I've seen in most clone controllers. And then this is the back again. There's really nothing to it. So that's interesting. That's much better than I was expecting. These rubber membranes look pretty much like the standard replacement ones that you can get. And then this bit here's the D-pad. Actually interesting. Looks like it has like a piece that fits into the casing a little bit there, and then there's this like little knob here, and that's obviously, that little knob there is what kind of determines how well the diagonals and the left and the rights work. And then this looks pretty simple. And then these buttons are just normal kind of cheapo NES buttons. And then you've got the rubber start and select buttons, and that's just kind of pretty standard. So that actually looks a little bit, I'm actually kind of impressed. I thought it was going to be really kind of a cheapo board in there, but they've put a little bit of work into this thing. So we'll just put this thing back together again. And perhaps I have sullied the sticker for naught, but nobody had really done anything with this. I think actually before I put this thing together, I'm actually going to take some pictures of it, and then I'll come back and I'll do my sort of final wrap up on the controller. Okay, so I'm back with just my final thoughts on the Hyperkin Cadet controller. Like I was saying while I was playing Super Mario Bros. 3, it actually feels pretty good. People had been talking about just the tactile, in a tactile sense, the controller feels pretty good. And then when I actually played it with Super Mario Bros. 3, that too felt pretty good. It feels pretty responsive. Feels about the same as playing using a Nintendo controller, an official one. I would say it's a pretty good solution for $10. It's got the 10-foot cord, so you don't need to even buy an extra extension cord if you don't want to. Seems like it would be a good option if you have an NES Classic. Pick one of these up. Again, instead of using an extension cord. So it comes in this standard NES style. There's also a black version that comes with the RetroN HD, the black model, which I think looks really great. I kind of want that one. If anybody does want to trade for a controller that has a hole in the back of the sticker, let me know. One thing that I'm just unhappy about is that the box was a little bit dinged up when I received it, but that was probably the postal service. But the decal, the vinyl, does have a couple of little divots in here, which is not great. And I've seen a couple of reviews where people had said that the vinyl was actually coming up, and I can actually see a little bit of bubbling in it. So that part of it's not super great. But it's pretty solid, and I was again surprised that it didn't have a glob top inside. There's an actual chip. It's a very simple controller, but they didn't skimp out, I think, in creating this. And Hyperkin, unfortunately, I think has a history of literally cutting corners. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this. I wouldn't mind getting an extra one if they come out with a black one at some point. I'll buy that maybe. I don't really hesitate recommending this to anyone, and I'm just going to do one more test with this very demanding platform game, Battletoads, and see if I can do the warp to level 3, and then if I get there, can I do the turbo tunnel? If I can do that with this thing, then I don't have any problems with it whatsoever. So let's see. I'm also probably a little bit out of practice here. Oops. Well, I messed up that, didn't I? That wasn't the controller's fault, though. That was all me. Alright, let's try resetting that. That was just me. But I have to say that this actually feels better than even the 8-bit controller with my replacement D-pad. In some ways... really? In some ways, the sort of softer feel of the controller helps in this, because like my Joy Card, I think is really responsive, but the controls are actually a little bit kind of stiff, which isn't usually a problem. But it is a little bit problem with this game, where in order to run, you have to do like a double tap. There we go. Did it. That always takes me a little bit of practice there. So, but yeah, it's actually really pretty good. I think I can kind of see why a lot of people are saying that this is the controller that they prefer to use now. Which, you know, really was surprising to me, because again, most of the time third-party controllers are not very good, and I actually have to kind of say I might actually start using this one more often myself. Certainly I'll use it upstairs in the family room with the RetroN 5, which I'm currently using my 8-bit controller with because it's wireless. But I also have, you know, extension cords, and those are kind of a pain. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? The more I use this controller, the more I like it. I also have to say, this is definitely better than the... Whoops, that was me. Definitely better than the NES Classic controllers. Even though they look almost identical, they look pretty much identical to an original NES controller, they do not feel as responsive. The buttons on that, especially the A and B buttons, are really not as good. And I don't think the D-pad is as responsive as the original NES controller is either. I had problems with doing the slide under blocks in Super Mario Bros. 3. What is going on there? Alright, well, maybe that's enough for for this run. I don't need to keep embarrassing myself there. I don't think that's not the controller, guys. That's me. Usually I can get through there. You know what? I think the problem is I was in the middle of the island instead of the bottom of it. We'll see if I can fix that this time around. Yeah, there we go. Ah, that stretch always gets me. Yeah, this is a pretty decent D-pad. Again, the A and B buttons feel a little bit hollower than I would like. They feel like cheaper plastic than the NES controller, although they are fairly similar to it. But yeah, obviously there's no real complaints in terms of gameplay. They do the job. And there you have it. Yeah, there you go. I mean, those mess ups were me, not the controller's fault. This feels really good. I am very, very surprised, and I'm actually feeling kind of tempted to pick up another one. I think I might wait to see if they release a black one at some point, because that would go really well with my RetroN 5. I have the black model. I might just start using this one more regularly. I really like my Joy card, but you know. It's I don't know. I feel like this one is pretty good. Just a little comparison here. The Joy card is obviously a little bit bigger than the than this thing. And actually, I have an original NES controller here too, and I'm not sure if I've seen anybody really do a comparison. Side by side, it's about the same. It's about the same size. Just you know, I'm really bad at doing this in a camera, but. Come on, what am I doing here? It's about the same size. They look very similar, and you know, the width and all that. So feeling this thing, it actually feels maybe a little bit heavier than the NES controller now that I think about it, or maybe they're comparable. And then just feeling this D-pad on this particular controller, this old NES controller, the buttons are really mushy, or a little bit mushier. I do like the feel of the A and B buttons a little bit more, but. You know, the D-pad on the original NES controller is a little bit lower than the one on the Hyperkin, but the pivoting feels about the same, and that's really what determines, you know, how you do your diagonals and your left and right and all that stuff. Select and start look to be about the same spacing. So, yeah, I don't know, guys. I have to kind of give this one a win. There you go. Hope you enjoyed it.